All right.
There we go. We're good. We
All
are
right.
live. Kia ora tato. Welcome to another Q&A style event here at Digital Boost. I'm Georgia Hatchis, your host. Today, I have the pleasure of sharing the screen with Peter Van Dahl. He is a technical trainer at AWS. So we've had some Amazon Web Services events the last few weeks. We're getting it all in. AWS is one of our Digital Boost Alliance members. So they are here to help you as small businesses get activated, be boosted, and they've got all these great plans and ways of doing that. So today, Peter's going to be talking to us about the Amazon queue for business. I'm going to let you run through that, Peter, and show us everything. But I just want to say thank you for coming and thank you for sharing your morning with us. This is so
Very
great.
much.
And those of you who are here on the Zoom with us, you can pop any questions into the Q&A. I might field those for later, for after, if they feel relevant. I'll weave them in, Peter, if that feels okay to you. I'll
Awesome.
also be checking our Facebook, our LinkedIn, our YouTube. If you have any questions in there, please pop them in. And this is just for Peter's sake and for all of you. The amazing thing about living in rural New Zealand is we do get our internet to pop out and in at times. And this morning was one of those mornings where the internet gods just were not working in my favor. And I was planning on what is it? Hot spotting and hot
Yep.
spotting for my computer. Yeah. So if I happen to disappear, it's not because I'm being rude. It is because the internet gods just aren't with us today, and Peter will take over. Peter, you're
Very much.
amazing. Thank you for being here. And take it away. Lovely to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. So, indeed, my name is Peter Van Dalen. You can see my name here. The name itself might not be that familiar over here, but it is very much actually where I'm from, which is Belgium. So
Oh,
that's where I'm from originally. So I've been 13 years now in Australia. So I'm based in Melbourne, sunny Melbourne.
oh, so it's quite early for you today.
It is. It's 8 o'clock actually here. It's relatively good weather actually today. And so today I wanted to talk to you about a really interesting feature, a very interesting service actually called Amazon Q Business. It's relatively new. It's part of that whole Gen AI story that is really unfolding, let's say, in the last 2 years. So let's get cracking. So just a little introduction about myself. This is me. Actually, I'm pretty well shaved this time. So, but that's just as I started with AWS when I actually thought they wanted us to wear shirts. So, believe me, it's a lot more casual as you can see in AWS. I used to be a scuba diver in a previous life. It's been a bit on hold. This is actually one of the reasons why this is on hold. This is my family. So my little one is now 9, actually, but I just love this photo. That was actually in New South Wales, around the central coast. But yeah, that has kind of put a stop on a lot of plans. Now, I've put here all my certs, believe me, not to brag, but actually one very specific one is going to be a focus at the very end. And that's this one here, the cloud practitioner. Because what we're going to tackle at the end as well is like, how do I continue from this? It's all fun and games to listen to a webinar, but how do I get more knowledge on AWS? And it can be daunting when you get started. I've been a trainer for now 3 years, and I always say the same thing. If you are new with AWS, this is the one. It's that simple. Doesn't matter what you're planning to do, the cloud practitioner will be the one for you. So we'll pick that one up at the very end. And just a little bit, just because I am very proud of it, I just very recently, just a few days ago, got my solution architect professional. So I'm super, super excited about that one. My first, thank
Congratulations.
you, thank you.
Yay.
That was pretty hard work. So that's why I'm pretty happy about that one. And that said, I don't have it yet, but it's scheduled for the 9th of September. The AI practitioner might also be one. So that's also that's also a foundational cert, but very much focused on AI. So if that's really something you say, oh, this is just something I want to get my head around, then that might be a really good starting point. I am also kind of starting in that. So I want to have my first cert very soon as well. All
And
right.
Peter, maybe
Yep.
you can
Go ahead.
talk to us about that at the end, a little bit more about the
Shall.
certifications, because I know that those of us here at Digital Boost, especially in small business, AI has been such a
Uh,
massive topic for us. over the past 18 months, and it's going to continue to just grow and change. So thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about. So we actually have 3 of those lined up. So, and I'm going to go through the whole thing myself. So yeah. Very excited about it as well. And indeed, and it's a bit of a challenge for small or medium businesses that you think like you hear about all this Gen AI. It looks very cool. Let's be honest, it's cool if you hear about it, what it can do, and it is actually really impressive. I've been playing around with it now for a while, and it just blows my mind. But then you feel like, is this something for us? Because normally working with these kind of massive models, and I think most of us have at least heard that, yeah, we use things like foundational models or large language models. That's typically names that float around. What we know about them is that they are big, really, really big. So basically they are not really classic, but they are deep learning machine learning models. So they have just grown to a size that is just mind-boggling, which makes it a bit of a challenge. How am I going to work with that? I don't have that infrastructure. No worries. Most of us do not. All right. There's only people like, Meta, our OpenAI, of course, with the Chat GPT, they kind of started this whole amazing period. Ourselves, we have the infrastructure to do that. So we're going to host those models for you. And so that's going to be the whole idea that don't worry about it. You don't need to have a whole data center of yourself. We're going to host those models. We're going to give you your own slice. Privacy is going to be really important as a business. I think it's the first thing we always think about. And you only will pay for as much as you use the model. You don't have to host it. You don't have to pay for all of that. So from a cost point of view, and of course, from a purely infrastructure point of view, and then from a security point of view, we've got you covered. And so
Go ahead. I was going to say, sorry, the security thing is massive. Like, I think that's where we've been going this whole time. How are we keeping our information safe? Is it just out there? Yeah. So this is great. Okay, I'll let you go. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Continue. No. That I'm glad you're pointing it out, because this has been one of our, I would say, one of the 2 main points that we've been driving since we've also jumped on this Gen AI train. And that is indeed the privacy of data. So basically, when you're using our Gen AI applications, our services, or you're even really playing with the model itself, which you can also do, it's always going to be within your account. All right. So it's always going to be your data in your account. We are never, ever, ever using that data to feed into the model. We don't use it to train. You might have heard of that. The models need to be trained. They need data. Lots of data. They are very hungry, if you know what I mean. Like, they constantly need more data to get better. But we don't use your data. That data stays within your account. None of our business. And you've got your own slice of that model, if you wish, purely for you. That has been the way we've put this up from the get-go. And that's different from some of the more publicly available tools out there, which you always have to be very careful about what happens to the data that I feed into it. So with us, it has always been about, it's your data, it stays your data, we don't touch it. So that's one. And then from a security point of view, of course, you can set up your own security around this as well. We'll touch on that a bit later. And then because it's based on, hey, you pay for what you use, then cost, of course, becomes interesting. So what is this one then that we're going to talk about? Because there's a lot of Gen AI stuff floating around, but we are focusing on the Amazon Q business. So you can see it is indeed a Gen AI. So we just introduced that assistant. And a lot of the services I find, at least within Gen AI, are a bit of an assistant type. Right? So what does it mean? Well, they're there to help you. They're not going to take over. So for those who are a bit worried about, AI is here, like that's it. The overlords are coming. Don't worry. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Not with this kind of AI. General AI, we will see. But generative AI, don't worry. You are very much in the driver's seat. All right. Like I said, I've been working with it now for a while, and do not worry. It is an assistant. It's just there waiting for you to tell it what to do. But it's actually a quite smart assistant. So it's designed specifically for work, and it can be tailored. That's the main thing here. It's not just, here you go, you got a model, as now what do I do with it? No, you will add your own documents, your own sources of information, which we will refer to as a data source. And you will add those data sources to your Amazon Q business applications. And we do use the word applications. Now, you are going to set up your own applications. Now that some of you might like, I don't know how to develop. Don't worry, you do not need any coding experience whatsoever. Actually, I'm going to show a little demo that actually sets up an Amazon Q business application. It takes 5 minutes to set up the application. I'm not kidding, it is that simple. So you can set up your own data, your code, and even some operations. So it's not just there feeding some code, some data, and you just ask questions. No, it can also be used to interact with the larger environment that you have. I will come back to that one in a minute. All right, so that's just the definition. Let's continue. And let's start with a tiny little demo. I'll put in quite a few demos here. Uh-oh, this thing is not playing.
It's the tech gods, I'm telling you. They're they're playing around with us this morning.
There should be a play button here. Okay. All right. Luckily, I do have my demos as a file separate. So let me just quickly go in there. Go. Move this. Yes. Demos. All right. Let's start the first one up then. Because they're pre-recorded demos. Because thinking that, you know, with a live demo, anything can go wrong. But hey, there we go. There we go. So this is the file itself. All right. So let me also set up the screen brush. Yeah, I've got it here. All right. So there we go. Now, here you can see I'm going to Amazon Q Business. So it's that simple, by the way. Let me just go back, maybe just for those who are indeed new to AWS. That's a good thing about recording. I can always go back. You can see it here. This is the home, the console home of AWS. So you can always go back when you're in your account by clicking on this little button. And this is the search field. And that's what we're using here just to find a service, which is, of course, our Amazon Q Business. There we go. Going in, just selecting it, and away we go. So that's our first encounter here with this. You can see there's 2 applications already there, so we'll use that one a lot. AWS training. There's a web experience there on the right, so that's just an URL that you get when your application has been created. That all happens for you, so that I can actually log in. You can log in with single sign-on. Here this time, it's just a standard user. And what I'm going to do here, because you enter a prompt, so I'm just going to type something in and give it a question, basically. And the question is here, what is Cloud Quest? I'm going to click. Well, I did click. See, it's thinking there for a second, and then it gives us an answer. It says, hey, it's a 3-day role-playing game helping users to build practical skills, yada, yada, yada. By the way, something I do recommend when it comes to getting a bit of hands-on. And it tells us what the sources are for this information. Now, so this application was set up, like I said, takes a good 5 minutes, and it is connected to a bunch of websites in this case. So the data source for this one was actually a publicly available website, namely our training and certification websites. There's a lot of information in there. Of course, if we want to have a look ourselves, it might take some time. Here we have prepared all that data. Again, it's public data, but you can do the same thing with your private data. And so it's being prepared for us so that when we ask a question, in other words, when we, let me just, there we go. When we enter a prompt, so another bit of terminology there, typical Gen AI terminology, entering a prompt or prompt engineering is all about asking questions to the model. And so the models they're called large language models. They are very interactive. So we're putting some prompt in here, some question, and it will interpret that. I'm not kidding, it actually interprets that. So what happens in the background is it basically turns that into some kind of numerical representation. Now it's done the same with your data. And that way it can start matching. Like a computer, if you think about it, traditionally doesn't work well with language. So how have we done that? Well, we've turned the language into something that the computer can understand a lot better, and that is numbers. So they're actually comparing numbers in the background. That's where the intelligence comes from. It's not that it suddenly understands our language. It doesn't really. It's just really good at pretending to do by representing everything first in numbers and then comparing those numbers. If you ever hear the word embeddings or even vectors, that's that numerical representation. All right, so that's what it will look like. This is a classic Amazon Q business application. As you can see, very user-friendly. You just have to ask it questions. And what I love about it as well is indeed that it will tell you where it finds the information. So you might have a bazillion different data sources connected to it, and it will tell you where it found the relevant information.
I mean,
Cool.
That's really important when you think about sources. When we talk about ChatGPT and saying, where are these sources coming from? And
Indeed.
Some of them don't exist. Some of them are fiction.
That has been a big issue with, I'm glad you pointed that out, actually. That's been a big issue with large language models in general. We call them the hallucinations. For me, that has been, I think, the most mind-boggling part of it all. The fact that a computer for me, as I grew up, I've been around computers most of my life, I found them fascinating. But also I found them fascinating because they've always been so deterministic. Like a computer doesn't make a mistake. Like humans do, there's always been. And now suddenly we have something that is a computer program, an algorithm that basically can make things up. And I think that is probably for me been the most difficult thing to get my head around. So now that's one of the things that Amazon Q Business does pretty well. It actually allows you to say, hey, you know what? All I want you to do when you come up with an answer is use the data sources that I have linked to this application. Nothing more. Don't go, freewheeling. Don't go inventing stuff here for me. So you do have control over that as well. So it's not that we just are at the mercy of the model. Not at all. We'll come back to that later. All right. So that's our first little demo. Let's just, switch that one off. So we'll probably have to do it with the files, but hey, that will work as well. And there we go again. All right, next. So Amazon Q, which is kind of like a cute name, is part of a bit of a family now already. So Amazon Q as a family, we are going to focus on this specific branch, Amazon Q Business. We already introduced it. It is indeed meant for businesses, large or small. The larger ones will just have more data sources. That's typically it. But there's also one, and I've played with this one as well, Amazon Q Developer. And Developer is pretty cool as well. So your business is indeed an assistant that will help you where you put in your data sources. The Amazon Q Developer will be integrated directly into your IDE. So if there are any developers in this session or listening later on, you probably know what an IDE is, an integrated development environment. It is the environment where you start logging in and start typing away on your code. So Amazon Q Developer is an assistant, yet again, which can be integrated with that IDE, and you can talk to it. Now, we said that with GenAI, it's all about adding prompts to the model and asking it questions. You do the same thing. You literally put in a comment. So when you have code, we do it properly, you put some comments in as well so that people after you can actually read the code. But by putting in comments now, you're actually starting to generate prompts for your model. You're talking to a model while programming. I can tell you, it is actually really cool. Again, it's not designing the entire application for you. It's just there to help you. Pretty cool stuff, honestly. Even has a security scan in there and everything. And we also introduced Amazon Q in different things like QuickSight. QuickSight is a business intelligence tool. Could be on top of a data warehouse, for example, where you want to visualize all of that data, all of those trends and analysis, which is cool in itself. But you still have to understand very well the data sets. Now with Amazon Q, you can actually ask questions about the data sets with natural language. So NLP, or natural language processing, is another word that you will hear quite a lot. It just actually means that we are capable now of interacting through those prompts with our model using plain English. and more other languages as well. I have to admit, it's been skewed a bit towards English, which was to be expected, but yeah, we're catching up on other languages as well. One day I'll be able to use Dutch. And then we also use it in Connect. Connect is actually a call center. So it's a service, an AWS service, to set up your own call center. Generative AI has been proving to be extremely valuable there. Think about it, a customer support person. You're sitting there, you've got a lot of going on. You need a lot of relevant information on that customer. That customer calls you, you don't know who that is. And now, within seconds, you need to have all the information so that you know what their case is about. You always hear them say, yes, okay, can you give me your name? I will look up your case. And then you're like typing away, blah, blah, blah. And then hopefully they find all the relevant information. That happens then automatically. Plus, they can do things like mood analysis, like they could give you an indication of like, this customer is getting a little bit angry. Very useful stuff. We also have a service.
Interesting, not to cut you off, Peter, but we did one of these Q&As on Connect. So those of you who are watching the replay, pop onto our platform and check it out, because they go through that. And I was fascinated by that as well, where they just do the, you got the transcript, it tells you what's going on, and then you can just pick it up and go, oh, okay, here's the summary of what this last call was, or this actual customer. So love that. I'll let you continue. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thanks for letting me know. I didn't know that. Actually, and that's a good one, because things like summary, for example, is something where LLMs shine. All right. They are pretty good at finding what is truly relevant within a text. And again, that's pretty amazing, actually, that they managed to do that. And so they are really good at plowing through massive amounts of data, which is, for our Amazon Q business here, going to be really useful as well. Because even a smaller business might have a lot of maybe compliance documents or a lot of rules and regulations, it always grows. Data has a funny tendency to always grow. So you can actually make that very useful by creating summaries for that. You could create then maybe an email out of the summary and then send that to people without you sitting there half an hour. Like, I'm blissfully free of these kind of tasks. My wife, for example, does that a lot in her job, and she has to plow through documents and then create emails and send that to stakeholders. That's going to help to save you so much time. And again, because of the fact that it's an LLM, you do want to read that stuff. Don't take it for granted. Like I said, you are in the driver's seat, and I want to stress that. It is not them doing all of that. It's not the models doing all the work and you're just sitting there like, okay, that's it, let's go play golf. No, you do need to, unfortunately, but you do need to read the results. And then, supply chain as well. It's not the service that we have, but I have to admit, I haven't really used that. So another little demo, but again, that thing is not going to work. Let me just try this. I found it. No worries. Technical issue solved. There we go. So this time we're going to see how Q can also be integrated in other places. We've integrated it in our very websites. So we're going here to a documentation website here. And you can see a little symbol there. That is actually that assistant. It's using the same Q business as you are using in the background. And of course, it's plugged into our documentation website. And so in this case, we're just typing in a little question here. You can see it's a limit there, around 1,000 characters. And what is an IAM policy condition? Now, don't worry if you don't know what this is all about. But IAM policies in themselves are pretty important from a security point of view. And they're basically the permissions that we can set for our users. Or we say, okay, that condition there, what is that? And it starts giving me a pretty decent explanation, actually. And it nicely structures it as well. I love that. They're pretty good, even though I didn't tell it to do this. And again, as you can see, sources. So this is basically Amazon Q Business, but integrated in our own documentation websites. Right? So it is an assistant that we're using now internally all the time as well. Awesome. Continue. Where am I? Oh, there we go. We're zooming out here a little bit. We've talked a lot about Gen AI also in general. I just want to put that in a context as well. So again, There we go. There's actually 3 layers of how you can interact. Now, for you, typically on this call, I would say probably this top layer will be what you're going to focus on. This is the ready-to-use kind of applications. And we just went through the Amazon Q ones. There's actually quite a lot of more, not maybe particularly generative AI, but ML or deep learning ones as well. You've actually mentioned one there, things like transcribing. Well, we actually have a transcribe service. There's a very cute one called Polly. I love the name. Some of our names are good, others not that much. But Polly is a really good one. So it basically takes text and turns it into speech. It does actually the opposite of transcribe. Played around with both of them quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. And they're just API calls. They can be very easily used inside other applications. So these are also applications that are out there to be used. You don't have to come up with, oh my God, how I'm going to convert text to speech or the other way around, how I'm going to translate. Don't worry about it. We got you covered there. So again, focuses, of course, on Amazon Q. Now, if you do want to go deeper, and this is going to be for those out there that are really very interested, the next level, and that could still be an interesting one though, is based on Bedrock. We've made a lot of noise around Bedrock, and I have to say for good reasons. It's been a really interesting experience for myself as well. This allows you to build your own generative AI applications. Now, again, that seems so daunting, like there's no way. Well, you don't really need any truly programming background. So I've set up some of these things myself without writing a line of code. It's pretty cool. So it has all the bits and pieces that you need already in that service, like setting up guardrails, agents, for example, which are all things, by the way, that are available in Amazon Q Business. The guardrails we'll see at the very end are a bit of security rules that we can set up here so that maybe certain topics cannot come up in the application, or some of the information cannot be divulged because it's too sensitive. So we can put some guardrails around that as well. And you're, again, in the driver's seat. Agents, that is an idea of adding more functionality to the model. The model itself is just there interpreting your prompts. That's basically what it's good at it. But how can it take action? So the agents are then more about adding more functionality so that it can interact with other services. But again, it's pretty easy actually to do. And so one of the things that I've played with Bedrock was called RAG, which sounds weird, but it's a retrieval augmented generation. And guess what that does? It allows me to set up an application using a specific LLM and then adding data sources to it. Now, guess what? That's exactly what Amazon Q Business does. So really what they're doing with Q Business is shielding us from a lot of these elements, but they're just there. So you can also imagine, once you're a bit used to this, it's not such a huge step. You have to be into it, generating your own applications, but it is honestly not as big of a step as you might think. So that might still be something that is really interesting, because there you have more freedom of choosing the kind of interface that you want. The last one is probably not for most of us. I don't even know if I'm going to truly dive into that level. I might, just because I want to have all the certs, but this is where we work with the models themselves. All right. So we have a whole bunch of infrastructure there. We develop our own CPUs just to help us be better at creating models, all of that jazz. So we're not going to go into that. That's deep technical territory.
Yeah, but also, Peter, yep. I just want to point out, it is great to have the knowledge of what these things are, even if we're just working on that top level, right? We're working with Amazon Q for Business, and we're not sitting here as business owners going, this is just crazy magic. Having an understanding of where it comes from and what it's built on. Like even you mentioning at the beginning, which was news for me, I know about like O's and ones or knots and ones, or however we, for computer language. Yeah. But you mentioning that is how Gen AI is interpreting, it's all through numbers.
Yep.
Blew my mind, right? And then,
absolutely.
And in my back mind, I know that. I go, of course, that makes total sense. But you actually bringing it to the forefront, then you go, okay, Gen AI doesn't seem as overwhelming because it's not just magic.
Indeed. For me as well, that really made it click. Like, okay, now I get how they're doing it. Indeed, yeah, the vectoring is really cool. It also changes the way they interpret things, because what they do basically is add thousands of dimensions to words. They interpret it in thousand different ways, giving it a number, and then you just have to see it as, we can only imagine three-dimensional space, but they have a 2000 dimensional space, and data points or words that are closer to each other in that space are more similar. So that's why now with Gen AI, one of the cool things is that search engines are getting a lot better. We can now type things in and it doesn't have to be the exact keyword. That was one of those frustrating things with search engines or our assistants. Try to talk to an assistant that actually literally interprets everything you say. That was the situation up until very recently. But with Gen AI, with that numeric representation, they can look for similar words. It's still pretty cool, don't get me wrong, but indeed it does make it a little bit less magical. That is true.
Yeah, and just putting it out there for people in small business who are like, oh, we're going to lose our jobs, or
Oh yeah.
If this is exciting for you, like maybe this is the path you want to go down.
Absolutely.
Learning how to create these models and just putting it out there. I'm loving every second of this, Peter. So thank you. Please continue.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear that. Well, yeah. I'm glad you're also mentioning that, because indeed there's been a bit of anxiety around this whole AI thing. There is one thing that I do feel is that we kind of want to be across this. Because of course it's going to be the thing, like if other people are using it and I'm not, that would be the only thing. Like you want to be across of this, but luckily, and that's what we've been striving to do, is indeed we're trying to make it not too difficult to step into this world. So hopefully that will help a lot of you out there. So this is a very simple slide. This is just saying that it really doesn't matter almost what kind of role you do. So this kind of Amazon Q business can help in a lot of things. Think about a sales manager, for example. Your sales information can be that data source that we put in there. Research, of course, as well. That's typically for larger companies. Marketing, for example, we'll see that in a minute. A little demo where I set up, for example, like a LinkedIn post based on some information. And again, it will give me that post and I can always tweak it. Like one of the bigger things, especially if you're more like a creative writer, whether it's marketing or you have to make a report at the end of the month or whatever to some stakeholders or whatever. It's always daunting to have this empty page in front of you. That is the most difficult thing. Again, I know, been there, done that. I've seen that enough. If Gen AI can just get us started and gives us a pretty decent summary or whatever we need it, even if we have to tweak it a bit, we've just saved ourselves probably hours of work. All right. Again, you're responsible for the end product, but they will help you get there a lot faster. You can probably do something else. Like as a small business owner, you probably have other things to do and other things that you probably enjoy more than making summaries of documents. Let's be honest. All right. So another little demo. There's a lot of demos in this. There we go. So again, we're at our console here. We're going back into Amazon Q Business after we visited Q inside the website. And there we go. Again, we've got our applications here. There we go. Again, we go to that URL so that you get automatically. Now you can make that a little bit more user-friendly with DNS and everything. So don't worry about that. So what are we going to do here? So there's a few chats here already. So I want some hands-on skill in AWS. That actually jumps a little bit ahead. But again, this is connected to our training website. So I say, hey, how do I get started? Actually giving us a really good idea of starting the free tier account. And then also using Skill Builder, the free account as well. And I'll mention that at the very, very end about in my list of resources. So what kind of certification? Again, the one that I pointed out at the very beginning, the certified cloud practitioner. And absolutely. So he got that correctly. So again, a lot of data is in those websites, and that might make it a bit daunting to actually find our way. Here, we can just simply ask away. And we do that with our training data, but obviously you would do that with your own data. So I love that kind of application because we're going to be using that very, very soon. All right, next. Just there we go. Yeah. This one back. So this one, it works. So a little bit of an overview. So what kind of features, what kind of functionality do we have? So let's have a quick look here. Delivers quick, accurate, and relevant answers to your business questions, security and privacy. I think we actually covered most of that already. So you saw it in action. It actually is pretty quick. Now, I also mentioned that there's a bit of work happening in the background before we actually get started. Those embeddings, the numerical representations, that does have to happen. But once that's done, that's why it's quick in answering, because it's done a lot of the work beforehand. It's very accurate indeed. It's pretty impressive actually, and indeed the relevancy. We were just talking about that x-dimensional space there, and the closer the data points are, the more relevant or the more similar they are. That has become one of the big new things that we're doing with our algorithms, that we can interpret things. That is very new, and that's very exciting. And that makes it so more lifelike as well. And we talked about security and privacy already. We know that. We can also execute actions. We have plugin, and I'll show that later on in my own account, but where it is. But you can connect your application, and for the moment, there's like 5 or 6 different plugins, but you can create your own custom plugin as well. It's like creating your own action. There, yes, you might have to maybe write a few things. It depends a bit on what you want to do. But for example, there are plugins already for Salesforce. So while you're asking your application to do something, it might then say, okay, look, in the background, I can update this sales opportunity for you in Salesforce, if you allow it to do so, of course. Respecting existing access control. Yeah, we actually have a slide on that, but just suffice to say that your users that are actually using that application will have a set of permissions. They might not have permission to normally access certain data sources. That will be respected by Amazon Q Business. It will look at those permissions, and if I usually work as an admin in my account, but I would typically have access to all the information. But if another user comes in and has limited access, they will only get answers based on the documents they are supposed to see. And that can also be really interesting. Again, maybe from smaller businesses, you're probably your own owner, so you've got access to all of it. But if you have multiple people working for you, then that could be pretty handy as well. Connecting to over 40 popular enterprise applications. We'll see a bunch of them in a minute. So these are those data sources. There can be a whole bunch of data sources. Guardrails, we already mentioned that one, and also even customize and control responses. So if there are some sensitive topics there, we can actually guide the model in there. We've also been pretty big, AWS, I mean, or Amazon in general has been really big on what we call responsible AI. So that was another pillar actually that we've been from the get-go really focused on. And this is really important as well. You might think, well, what is that really about? Well, in a nutshell, your response will be as good as the data that you feed. Now, the problem that we see, and it's more with the fact that LLMs are based on almost internet-sized data, literally, like it's an insane amount of data. The problem is that there's a lot of bias out there, because we're human. All right? Humans have biases. Unfortunately, a lot of times we're not even aware of that. The problem with that is if we feed all of that biased information into a model, it's just going to take that over. Because the model itself is still a computer program. It's not going to make any value decisions on that itself. It can't. All right. It is still just a computer. All right. But we can. So we can then put in guardrails and try to guide it. And it's been something that we've been extremely passionate about in AWS to make sure that we get some, I would say, unbiased, or as much as we can, and more inclusive responses as well. And then streamlining daily tasks as well. Now, this has been pretty new, but what you can do is you could have an interaction with this application, all right? And it's something that you find yourself doing maybe daily. Like every day I've got a similar question, or other people within my organization have that same kind of similar set of questions that they need to do. And it's always a bit of the same thing. So why can't we just kind of wrap that up and create a bit of a shortcut? And that's what our lightweight apps are then about. So we can then actually take one of those sequences of interactions, wrap them up, say, okay, I need these and these parameters. If I feed it into this sequence, I don't have to then type in all those prompts. Hey, you know what? Give the input and I'll get the output, even though there's a whole bunch of steps in between. So we basically wrap up again, even the work we're doing with Amazon Q Business, we can then add another abstraction layer to it. It seems like it never stops. I think it will end by the time that it can read our mind. I don't know. It's I think that's when it's going to end. But it is insane. But it's all about saving us time. That's really what it's about. All right. So another one. There we go. So we're back in Amazon Q Business, and this time we got our two applications here. We're going to create an application. Now I promised you that was going to take 5 minutes. So let's see. Give it a name, of course. Now Colmer, by the way, is my colleague that was supposed to, let me just stop this one here for a second, who was supposed to do this presentation. He is unfortunately sick, but I respected it and I took his demos. So if you see the word Colmer, it is my friend and colleague, Paul Colmer. Let me go here. Oh, where am I? So yeah, service access, just create a new service link role. So roles are a way of setting up permissions in AWS. So we're not going to go into too much detail there, but suffice to say that we need that. Everything is always encrypted by default. So that's all fun and games. We have connected it to an IAM identity center, which is our single sign-on. We can do some tags there as well. So with Identity Center, we can then add some users into it. Again, you might be alone, but you might have other people as well. Now, I talked about, stop here for a second. I talked about the fact that we do this numerical representation, right? Now, for that, we will use a retriever that can run through an index. That's what they call it here. An index, basically the numeric representation of all that data. Now, you can use either a built-in retriever. This is called a native retriever, which is brilliant for most cases. Or if you've already set up maybe a data store with Amazon Kendra. Now, Kendra is a enterprise-based search engine that you can use as well. So if you already use that, you can also link it to that. We're not going to go into Kendra. I do not have Kendra myself, but just to make sure that if you do have it, don't worry, you can reuse it. So we're doing the native retriever here. Now we have to say a little bit about the provisioning, just a tiny bit, and we can choose between enterprise and starter. Now there's obviously going to be a difference in pricing. There's a link there. Enterprise is full on, as you can see. Let me just stop it here for a second. As you can see, up to 1 million documents, and very important as well, it's a multi-AZ, multi-availability zone deployment, which makes it extremely fault tolerant. It's actually spread over multiple of our data centers. But we could lose an entire data center. It wouldn't affect your application. It's that good. Starter is a lot more humble. Obviously, it will be more humble in pricing as well. Great for little points of proof of concepts or demos or stuff like that. And so the choice was made for enterprise here, but we only select one unit, which means we still have only a small amount of data. So that's the retriever. So we just set up the base application. We talk about the retriever. That's the whole indexing. Now we need to define the data source. So the top three here are the most popular one. Amazon S3, which is our object storage, a web crawler, of course, or simply adding some files directly. But as you can see, there's a whole lot of applications that we can directly connect to through connectors. A lot of third-party like Gmail here, Google Drive, Dropbox, Confluence. There were a whole bunch of AWS services as well. There'll be a lot of very familiar names, I'm sure. Microsoft Teams, Slack, Salesforce. This is SharePoint there as well. So you name it, there's like 40 of these that we can select. But we're going for the classic one, we're going for a web crawler. So we need to give that data source a name. Colmer source. And this time he connected this to his own web page. That is very much Paul, I can tell you. So source URL, and he's going to put in here, he's copy pasting the name of his own website. And I really didn't have the heart to change this one. It's like, it's so fun. So he just puts in the name here, and he's got digitalcolmer.com. He writes blogs on mostly GenAI these days. There's no authentication. This is a public website, so no authentication has to be set up here. It's not an internal website, so no web proxy is required here, but that's also possible. And again, we need to have the right permissions. But the good news is, hey, let the system create the permissions for us. Done. Now, synchronization. We can choose, I'm again going to stop this one a bit. So we can choose how we're going to synchronize the domain. In other words, our data source. We can just do a high level domain only. Now the domain of course could have subdomains in there as well. I am pretty sure Digital Colmer doesn't really, but for example, our training and certification website might have some subdomains in there. So that way I can go through the entire set of URLs, or I can go for sync everything, which is everything it also refers to. Now you want to be a little bit careful with that one. That could take a while. I've tried that once. I had to just simply stop it. It was just not going anywhere. Especially with more public domains, you might have that. The sync mode, whether we do a full sync every time that we synchronize, or whether or not we just look for anything that is new. I would probably refer to the second one. And then, of course, how often do we synchronize with the data source? In this case, we're going for on demand. So whenever I decide to synchronize. But you could set it like a daily thing. If you know that your data source gets updated every day with new sales information, for example, daily is probably your frequency there. So you have to know your data source a bit. So it's adding the data source here in the background. That again takes like 30 seconds. As you can see, we're not really cutting a lot here. It's just really real time. It's going to go up now and go for the next step. As you can see, this was step 3, connecting the data. They're also nicely guiding you, so you don't. I at least don't feel like I'm getting lost. Well, there we go. That was it. 30 seconds. Web crawler has been added. Now, that doesn't mean that the data source is completely ready. We'll see that at the very end. Now, we could potentially add some, there we go, stop this here, users or groups. Remember, at the very beginning, when we set up the application, we were connecting it to what we call the IAM Identity Center. That's our single sign-on. Now, we're not doing that here in the demo. It's a bit its own thing, but believe me, it's pretty easy. If you've already set up something like single sign-on, you can very easily connect that into. So that means that you only have one login for all your AWS stuff, including your applications here with Amazon Q Business. Where am I? So you see, we're always at the end. And so we're going to skip that here and then create the application. Here we're going to get automatically a URL. It's cleaning up a little bit here. See, the data source is actually still being created because there's going to be a lot of indexing going on. As I said, all of that will take a bit of its time, but the application theoretically is available. So you see, I'm also creating an IAM role for you. That all takes a little bit of time, but still pretty decent. I think that is going to be around it. I know, I think he's going to go back. Yeah, there we go. So if you're going back here, there we go, Colmer app. You can see it's created, deployed. There's even a URL. But if I click on the application itself, just scroll down a bit, you do see that the data source is still being set up. It does take time. It has found it. It says, yes, I know. And then you can see here, he's pointing at, let me just switch that down. So once, not sure why that's happening, but anyway, once this is going to be available, you can then just click on sync now and synchronize now. Or I can just start adding more data sources as well. All right. And then quickly start this one as well. So in the meantime, he's deleted his own app here. You can see that it's already deleted. Also, this does take a little bit of time. There's a lot of stuff that has to be dissolved. But going into another one, this is another little feature there. Like we've talked about data sources, setting up the information. Now, in this case, we're going to start with a question that it does not know the answer to. Again, this is based on the training and certification website, and it's asking us about Amazon Z. Now, Amazon Q, it knows, but Amazon Z doesn't exist. So I have no idea. So it's honest enough, right, to say, hey, I'm not making this up. So this is a proof as well that because we're putting this in an environment that's a little bit more, how to say, constrained, that we don't just start hallucinating. But what we can do is maybe just for this session here, I actually need some additional information. And I might have a document in here. Now, in this case, you can see the document is mentioned here. And it is basically a made-up description of a hybrid car called the Amazon Z. It's completely made up. The funny thing about it is the text itself is actually generated by a Gen AI model. It's just, it never stops, isn't it? It's like those pictures within pictures. So we actually use the Gen AI model to just make up a random story. That one we let hallucinate, I can tell you that. And then we just feed that document in there. So we say, hey, same question, knowing this. So this is also a type of prompt engineering where we say the prompt is the same, but we're adding more context to the prompt. I'm using the terminology here on purpose. So continue here. And now it says, hey, you know what? Thanks to all that information you send there, now I know what you're talking about. It's just giving us a little bit of a feedback or a summary, sorry, about this imaginary self-driving vehicle, as you can see. So it's a bit of a, I've got a document myself. I made my own just for the fun of it. So just go to the next. And what was this one here? Now we've done that one already. Yeah, that's the thing. Next one then, sometimes just jumps back. We already talked about this as well. So safety and security, as I said, when a user logs in, again, you might just have the one user. You might have multiple users. If you are the one user, you're probably an admin. So you're probably pretty okay when it comes to permissions. But sometimes you might have people working for you that you say, hey, there are certain data sources that they shouldn't be aware of or at least not have access to. Well, like I said, Amazon Q Business will take that into account. So when a user gets connected to your application, it looks at its permissions and any data sources that it doesn't supposed to know about or have access to will not be included when an answer gets generated. So it actually tweaks itself. Its own answers get tweaked based on the scope that is allowed for the users. So that's not just the fact that, hey, your data stays with you. It obviously does. It's all part of your own account. But even within the account, multiple users might have different access permissions. And we also take that into account. So we already talked about this. So quickly, we do have, oh, sorry about that. We do have guardrails, indeed, for, amongst others, toxicity. There's a few things that we can do with that. We can restrict responses as well. We can say that, hey, you know what? Any answer that you come up with can only be based on the documents, the data sources that we have added. We cannot use the general knowledge of the LLM because the LLM was built, was trained on huge amounts of data. So it has a lot of knowledge as well. General knowledge, public knowledge. Problem, first of all, with public knowledge is indeed potentially the bias. But second of all is that it doesn't necessarily get updated because the model has been trained. It has been a really interesting little dilemma. Like you have a model in front of you. It's been training for months. Like literally, I'm not kidding. It takes months with an insane amount of massive processing units. And then it gets out of date. But the thing is, the LLM itself is its main value is the fact that it can work with us on natural language processing, not the fact that it has the most accurate, up-to-date information. It does not. So you need to be really careful with that as well. So the way to do that is, generally speaking, by using something like a RAG, for example. Remember, retrieval augmented generation, which is what we're doing by adding data sources, which is also why we had a sync frequency when we were setting up the application. Remember? Daily, hourly, or whenever I click on the button on demand. But so that makes sure that we use data sources that are kept up to date as well. And that's very important in our business, of course. You can specify blocked words, for example, all of that stuff. So you can make it a very safe environment as well. Again, something that we find really, really important. And then we can also set specific topics, and then maybe some predefined answers to those topics as well. Again, more important if you have a more larger organization where you have multiple users, where as an admin, I want to control a little bit what kind of answers they get. So we know it works with single sign-on, private link. I'm not going to go into that here. CloudTrail is one of our services that will check all the interaction with your application. So again, very important if you have multiple users, what are they up to? CloudTrail is Big Brother. We should have called it Big Brother. I don't think it's politically correct. But anyway, it would be, it really is what it does. CloudTrail checks literally all the API calls that are happening within your account. Now, everything you do is an API call. So in other words, CloudTrail checks all user activity. It's watching everything you're doing. So the moment you log into your AWS account, assuming CloudTrail is enabled, and honestly, there is no good reason not to enable it, that means that there is at least something that is keeping track of what people are doing. If for nothing else, purely from a security point of view, that is really important. But you know what? We also sometimes make mistakes. That helps us to find out, hey, what happened? How can I undo? And then we're getting towards the end. Might skip that here for the moment, because can you just tell me what we're doing for time here? Because
we've got 3 minutes, Peter, but we're fine if you need to go over. It's, you know, this is being recorded and
okay.
At their leisure.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I told you I could easily fill the hour,
which I love. You said we could talk about this for 2 days, which yeah,
absolutely good. Absolutely good.
Yeah.
All right. In that case, I will continue, because this one is also quite interesting. So again, Colmer app is still deleting there in the background. We're going back to the AWS Training Certification 2 there. And we're going to go and have a look at, there we go. What is Amazon Q? So there's a little application here. So we're starting with a simple prompt. Hey, what is Amazon Q? Gives us a bit of information. Again, comes from our training website, so no problem there. Gives us the sources. We're kind of getting used to this stuff already. Now, next thing I'm going to do is, okay, could you please write an abstract for a presentation on, and this is very specific, ACL ingestion. That says, hey, don't know exactly about ACL ingestion, but I found some information actually on ACL itself. ACL, by the way, is where you can put constraints on your data sources, access control lists, and it gives us a little abstract that I could then integrate in my presentation, for example. This is quite cool, isn't it? So if I need to talk, this is for a presentation. It could also be for an email to stakeholders. Now, this is too long. Please rewrite in 2 sentences. What I, by the way, find really interesting about this, and this is a very Gen AI specific thing. Think about it. I'm talking to a computer in the end, and I say, hey, please rewrite in 2 sentences. That's not a really, how to say, deterministic sentence. I am not telling the model what exactly needs to be rewritten. Think about it. Like, this is how I would talk to a human, all right? Because we get context. Humans are really good at context. Traditionally, a computer algorithm was notoriously bad at that. So another thing that Gen AI has introduced really successfully, and again, things like Bedrock, for example, work with that a lot as well, is context and a context window. So it remembers the previous questions and it can link that to what has already happened. So when I say, and I've done that quite often when indeed I ask it to write something, for example, and I say, well, okay, can you change this, adding this or this? I don't have to say, the summary you just wrote in the previous question, could you please rewrite? No, it knows what I'm talking about. And that itself is also pretty awesome. Again, very different from how we used to interact with computers in general. So we get our 2 sentences. We're happy with that. And then just for the fun of it, I'm quite happy they did that. They are, there we go, translated into Spanish, please. Aquí. Aquí está la respuesta traducida al español, blah, blah, blah. So my wife is from Colombia, so I've gone through this, so it is actually really good. The Spanish is actually really good. And there we go. And say, yeah, but again, it's too long, so please back to 2 sentences. And it's quite funny because I'm actually talking to the model in English, assuming that I, for example, actually don't know Spanish too well. I could just talk to it in English, but I get my response in Spanish. So as long as I make that one clear, of course. You would have to put the language in in your request. But so you can see how we could start using this, whether it's for a presentation, whether this is for emails, or, and that's the next one. There we go. Just going to let this one run. So same, we're in the same context here. And then we have another one that just cut this into 2. Write me a LinkedIn post. Now, I love this because, again, Paul loves writing on LinkedIn. He's very active on LinkedIn. I dabble on LinkedIn. He's there all the time. So brilliant example. But yeah, could be very useful. As a business, you want to generate your social media presence. That could be very useful as well. Because not everybody, so you can see it here, like a bit boring answer here. Oh, just chuck a few emojis in there, like just make it, spice it up a little bit. Well, that's good. Okay, we came up with a few things. I love the last one though. So it puts in a whole bunch of things based on the words, of course. Can you rewrite this in the style of Paul Colmer? Again, my colleague, which is great, but I don't have my own website like that. So remember, he fed now his own website in there as a data source. That gets analyzed. And now, and just read it. So he said, this bad boy is designed specifically for. Now, I know Paul pretty well. Spent time in reInvent last year and everything. I know him pretty well. I can hear him talk. I'm not kidding. I can hear him talk when I read this. It is very much his style. So it's pretty fun to listen to. So this is awesome. So it somehow captured the essence of how he talks, how he presents things, and was able to rewrite its own text in the style of Paul Colmer. And that is pretty awesome, if I'm very honest. So once you have a bit of a social media presence, you will have a certain style. Everybody has. If you've been writing it, then of course, one problem would be if from now on Gen AI is generating your texts. Saves you a lot of time and effort. But people probably got used to your style as well. And the fact that they keep coming back probably means that they like your style. So this way, at least you don't have to sacrifice that as well. So I thought that was actually pretty useful. So the last one should be pretty much repeats unified conversational search. And I hope by now that is indeed clear. Generates summaries, extracts key insights. It's really good at that. Again, saving us a lot of time, of course. Again, something I find pretty impressive about Gen AI. Accelerating content creation, you just saw me do that, or at least saw the demo do that. And then streamlining tasks, we haven't really gone too deep into it here, but remember there are plugins that we can add, and that is just going to grow. Don't forget, this is actually a pretty new service, which could be also custom plugins. And we can abstract away a whole sequence of interactions into our own applications as well, so that people don't have to even know what kind of prompts to come up with anymore. This is a little quote here from Arun, from a principal engineer in Derif. The main gist there is that they were so surprised how fast they could get started with it. And that's what we kind of stressed from the beginning. You really don't need a huge technical baggage here. You don't truly need to understand what Gen AI is. It helps though. I do feel. That's why I have added some background information. That's why it's a bit longer than what we planned. But I just wanted to make sure that you do understand what is kind of happening. Like you said, take away a little bit of magic so that you feel like, yeah, no, I kind of get this. All right. So they were pretty happy as well. Now, what do we do? How do we continue? So what I've done at the beginning, you saw my search there, my little brag there. But there were three little badges that I didn't add, and specifically because I wanted to talk about them here. And so this one here is the Cloud Quest Cloud Practitioner, for example, and that combines two interesting sources of information, really. And so when you want to get started, which hopefully by now you're getting really excited and you say, oh, I want to get my hands on this stuff, but maybe you don't even have an AWS account at this point. Maybe you're just really getting started, right? You know what? You can set up a free AWS account. If you just go to this, aws.amazon.com/free, you can just get started. So accounts with AWS are free, the account itself. You only pay for what you use, and it's our philosophy. So if you're just trying things out and you stay within the free tier, you're not going to pay for them. Right? Just check in on the same web page. You will get some information on what is included in the free tier. Now, obviously, if you go beyond the free tier, you will be charged. We always joke about it in my classes, but there's two things you need when you set up an account. One is an email address, because we do need to be able to connect to you if there's something going wrong. And the second one is a credit card. So, so even though you might be using this as a free account, we do need a credit card just in case you go beyond the free tier. So if you're being a bit careful, and I used to have a free account, a personal account myself. I now use, of course, AWS accounts. I barely spend a dollar on those things. Similar, Skill Builder. So Skill Builder is our LMS, or learning management system, where we have a ton of goodies. What do I mean with that? We have over 600 different courses in there, free. All right. So there is a free subscription and there is a paid tier as well. Honestly, if you're getting started, just stick to the free tier. Literally, it's free. And you'll have hundreds of these resources, hundreds of these courses. Some of them very short, some of them can take hours. And you'll have that all available. And you can start looking then into, hey, I've heard about this service, actually don't know anything about it. You just go into the search engine, you go find the resource, click on it, and start doing the course, all for free. Including getting prepped for the Cloud Practitioner certification. If you remember, we asked our Amazon Q business actually the question, hey, what certification should I start with? Guess what? Cloud Practitioner certification. It's the first one, it's the foundational one. And yes, I do recommend, if you are interested, start there. I did the same. A good 3 years ago, I was new with cloud. I was brand new. But I knew like this is the future. This is where I want to be. And I want to be a trainer in it, because that's what I do. I'm a trainer. So that's where I started. Cloud Practitioner certificate. I'm very glad I did. I can tell you that. Now, nowadays, within Skill Builder, there is a service called Cloud Quest. I know the word cloud pops up quite a lot, but Cloud Quest is, and you can see a little screenshot here that I've added. It's a looks like SimCity, doesn't it? Or like a bit of a 3D game, but that's actually what it is. It's a 3D game. You run around in the city. Yes, this is an actual giraffe. There are pets running around there as well. You have your own, modes of transportation as well, and you can then build up the city yourself. Now you build it up by solving challenges, and the challenges themselves are all about actual requests from people. A lot of them actually small businesses like yourself. I think there's one in there with a pet shop as well, and so they've got an issue with their website and stuff like that. They're like, hey, can you help us? And of course, this is to get you started with typically a specific service. And so they will send you through this 4-step approach where they first give you some theory, then they say, hey, look, to solve the problem of this person, we need this diagram. Let's get going. And then you go into a lab guide and then go through it. And you actually go into the console, which you saw through all the demos. You actually go through the console and solve that issue. Step by step, you're being guided. And then when you're done, they will ask you an additional question. The fourth step is a do-it-yourself. And they say, you've set all of this up. Can you, for example, add another this or another, or can you change the permission, blah, 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 whatever it is, but depending on the context. So you then have to do something, but without guides. Once you've gone through it, you should be able to then apply it yourself. But it's actually that do-it-yourself that I think is really, really useful. And you go through like 12 or 15 of these challenges. They do take a bit of time, so you spread that out. And then you've got this amazing hands-on experience. And then you're definitely ready to do your exam. All right. So I've got another one here, Solution Architect. That is definitely the next level, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. You can also have specific badges in Skill Builder just by following some of the more theoretical resources. As you can see, I've done that for networking. I'm still planning to do my networking specialty, so I've done that a bit as a stepping stone. But so Skill Builder is where you find all the resources to really skill up, both hands-on and theory. And then, of course, you've got your free tier account to actually get started, if you don't have already your own account, of course. And Paul was nice enough to generate, I don't know how he did these ones exactly, but anyway, two links, one to a hands-on look specifically for Amazon Q Business, and then another one for the Amazon Q, the family, and not just Q Business, learning plan as well. So I'll leave that here for a bit for those who want to then just take the QR codes and get started with it. I need to ask him.
Fantastic, Peter. I love these. I love that Paul set this up for us too. And he was here with us in spirit, even though he couldn't be here
absolutely.
with us, live. Thank you so much for such a thorough presentation. Like, I feel like I've learned so much, and I know the people streaming in have probably learned a lot. I don't see any questions at the moment, but if questions do pop up, you can obviously come through the support team here at Digital Boost, which is support@digitalboost.co.nz. But Peter, is there any way to reach out to you or a team there? What's the
absolutely? I'm happy to get questions about what we've gone through here.
Is LinkedIn best?
Probably, yeah. I would say LinkedIn, in the end. I was thinking email, but I have to say I've got a bit of a backlog. So now you want to go.
Email will probably be, you might get inundated with email. So hit Peter up on LinkedIn. If you do go to our Digital Boost LinkedIn, I've already tagged him in there. So you'll be able to find him on this live stream. Peter, thank you for taking your time and for getting up a little extra early for us this morning. I really appreciate spending time with you. This was really great. And I feel like I learned so much. So I'm going to release you because you probably need to start your day. And thank you to those of you who were here live with us, and to those of you who are watching the recording. Enjoy, or I hope you've enjoyed it, because we're at the end of this.
All right.
Great. I'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
All right. See ya. Everyone.
Bye-bye.